Hello, creeps and freaks out there.
Hello.
We had the opportunity today to visit Riverside Cemetery for a walkthrough and story time about some of the monuments and some of the people who are buried there today.
And the symbols of the gravestones and monuments that are there.
Yes, so let's take a peek.
So when you go into any proper Victorian cemetery, the first thing you're going to see is just a sea of urns. There's going to be urns everywhere. The urn, which came into fashion after the very macabre death's head, which I'm sure you've probably seen those on like a lot of the Halloween tombstones, this is what replaced it. It was a super common symbol. You'll find them pretty much anywhere. The significance of it was back during the time of the Romans and the Greeks, the urns were used to hold oils and perfumes that they would use to anoint the body. If you look on kind of the top part there, you'll see a cloth draped over it. Anytime you see a cloth on a grave, what it's representing there is the death shroud. So it's going to be artfully placed. There'll be a little bit of fringe sometimes. Very, very cool. So on Mr. Hemmeter's grave, he also has a lot of other symbolism. He was a part of the Masons. He was part of the Masonic order. In the very center there, you can see kind of the circle, and it has like a little square inside of it. That is a Knights Templar Masonic symbol. And what it basically means is, in this sign, thou shalt conquer. So that was pretty cool. You don't see a lot of Knights Templar stuff on the stones. The phrase below it, which I am not going to try and pronounce in Latin because I will butcher it, but it basically means, God hath granted us this ease. If you look at this particular marker here, so this is the marker for Hemmeter, him and his wife, and the phrase underneath it is, God sent forth his breath and they were scattered. Better? Okay. So after that awesome story, he has quite the dramatic looking grave, doesn't he? Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like a bathtub, like a clawfoot bathtub. But so this kind of tomb, it's actually a super unique one. We don't typically see these outside of Europe. So this is called a sarcophagus tomb, which I think is ironic because sarcophagus means tomb. So it's a tomb. So the tomb does not have a body in it on top. I know it looks like a body is resting in there, but that would get real not fun real quick. These were super popular during the Egyptian craze that the Victorians were really into. They loved the idea of recreating the Egyptian burials. So aside from a lot of Egyptian iconography that you'll see on a lot of tombs, you'll also see sometimes these here, like as if you were lowering the coffin into the grave. So I thought you guys would find that one interesting. The second one that we're going to talk about in this section is actually this edifice over here for Mr. Reeves. You can see that it is, it's like a log cabin, as if it was a tomb. So this is one of my favorite finds that I did during researching this. So this tomb, you will see a lot of other pieces of like logs or wood throughout the cemetery. So the story behind this is that this is marking the grave of a gentleman, Mr. Reeves, who was a member of the fraternal order called the Woodman of the World.
Wow.
So the Woodman of the World was a fraternal organization that happened after the Civil War. They originally got together because there was no such thing as health or life insurance at the time. And of course, with the deaths that happened in the Civil War, a lot of these people were left without husbands, fathers, people to take care of them. So this fraternal order got together. They are actually still active today. They just sell life insurance, which I thought was kind of interesting. But their whole premises with the wood is that their founder said that no woodman shall ever rest in an unmarked grave. So you will see the woodman, like you'll see little logs, you'll see a stump sometimes. that you will also see sometimes the crest, and it has like an axe and a piece of wood. They really liked wood, if you can tell. But this is probably the best example of one that I've ever seen. So Mr. Reeves, whoever he was definitely a bigwig in the Woodman of the World fraternal organization. Also, you will sometimes see their wives have the same thing too. There was a ladies' order. It was called like the Woodwomen of the World. So, very creative. But they also would give their wives and sometimes children the same type of grave. So, whenever you see that, that's known as the Mr. Woodman of the World. During in the back saying she can't hear. So I'm going to try and talk as loud as I can.
There you go.
So anytime you see a tomb that has rocks or any kind of big, large, stone-looking rock over it, it is representative of the stone that was in front of Jesus' tomb and was moved on the third day. So anytime you see that, it also can be representative of this is the rock on which I build my church. Very biblical symbolism with this. The IHS, just in case anybody doesn't know, is meaning for Jesus, Savior of Man. Okay, everyone. So the next one that we're going to be looking at, if you kind of look into the lawn over there, you see the gentleman, his name is Astra, and he has the wreath that's around the one side. Okay, so wreaths are another common thing that you'll see in Victorian tomb architecture. They represented victory over death. A lot of times we will culturally see them on the heads of Roman or Greek emperors. This was again, of course, about victory. It also, at the time, was, it absolved the wearer of the sins from the lives that they took during battle. So, of course, on a tomb, it's going to absolve you of those sins. It's also a symbol for the Vestal Virgins, who were a group of priestesses in Roman times who were tasked with keeping the flame of Hesta alive, who was the goddess of the hearth. She was the one who protected the city. So as long as the flame stood, Rome would stand. So at this time period, to not have a grave marker was almost completely unheard of. You would either have had to been so poor that you were buried in a pauper's grave, or you were a criminal. The fact that on one side of this cemetery we have, you know, the original Hemeter, who has this beautiful grand tomb, and then you come over here and his relative has absolutely nothing for his whole family. I feel like it's almost more telling that there isn't anything there. But you will, at this time period, you will almost always find a grave. This was probably the weirdest thing that we found when we were doing this. We're like, what do you mean they don't have anything? So that's kind of the weird little thing we found out with this. Okay, everyone, so the next one that we're going to be talking about is Mr. Behringer right here. So in my research of the cemetery, one thing that I was expecting to find, but I could not find a lot of, was the hand symbols. So hand symbols are super common out in more rural cemeteries. This is the only one I could find here. What the hands mean, and you will see a lot of these if you visit older cemeteries. Hand pointing up means a soul ascending to heaven. A finger pointing down, which looks pretty awful, but it's actually supposed to be God reaching down for the soul. In this case, we have a pair of clasped hands. Now, sometimes a clasped pair of hands can mean a husband and wife reuniting at death. If that is the case, one of the hands will have cufflinks, the other pair of hands will have a lace cuff, husband and wife. This one, though, is a little bit more dark than that one. So if you notice the hand on the left, the fingers are very straight and stiff looking. That is not by
accident. The stiff fingers are supposed to be the lifeless body of the person buried there. The hand that is around it is more soft. It's grasping it. That is the soul pulling the body out of the grave. So the soft hands are the living life of the person that is now, in the afterlife. The straight hands are the corpse.
Wow.
This is the Hochfelder family grave. So the first thing we need to talk about is the 7 virtues. So again, the Victorians love some good symbolism. And I would say probably 80% of the time you're in a cemetery and you see a sculpture of a woman, it's most likely going to be one of the 7 virtues. Just as a reminder, the 7 virtues are faith, hope, charity, temperance, prudence, fortitude, and justice. In this case, we have faith. Faith is identified by the open Bible that she has and the child with her. Each of the virtues have different attributes that can help you figure out who is who. Sometimes it's a little bit more tricky than others, which we have a few of those down the road here. Then I want you to kind of look, I don't know if you can see down here, there is a tiny little grave of little Freddie Hochfelder. So Freddie Hochfelder was one of the infants of their family who sadly enough died. If you look at the very top, there's a reclining lamb on the tomb. In a time before antibiotics, vaccines, and modern medicine, unfortunately in Victorian cemeteries, there were many flocks of these little lambs. Children usually didn't live past a year old. So you will either see for children a reclining lamb or a dove. That's a super common one. If you guys look out into the cemetery, you will see a lot of these little things. Unfortunately, they're very weathered. This one, it looks like, has been recently replaced. So keep your eye out for those when you're looking. Outside of Europe, we typically do not see sculptures of the people who are buried. Like I said before, most of the time it's either going to be one of the 7 virtues, an angel, Christ, the Madonna. In this case, it's her. So I think that having her watch over everybody here is something really special and unique, especially for this area. The symbols and everything that they are carrying is just as interesting. So if you notice, the woman on the left is holding an open book. This is significant of life beginning. The closed book is life ending. And if you notice, her gaze is downward. It's very somber. She's also holding a palm leaf. Palm branches were representative of triumph over death. They were also the symbol of martyrs. If you look, the 2 flowers on either side of the monogram there, so that is a pansy. Now, Victorians are really into flower language. I don't know if you've ever known that, but they had a whole language that had to do with giving and receiving flowers. So the pansies basically mean that you could hear your loved one's thoughts and memories, which could be kind of creepy. I don't know if I'd want to come up here and hear the memory of the huckster. But, and then if you notice on either side of those 2 columns, that is a clover. So of course we know those as for luck. Paper over here. It also is a symbol of the Trinity. So since he was a Bible salesman, I feel like that pretty much fits with everything there. No restraint when it comes to what is on this grave. So I'm going to start at the top and we're going to kind of work our way down. So the first thing you're going to notice is that broken column. So in Victorian symbolism, broken columns or the obelisks that you see will sometimes look like they've been cracked at the top. That's intentional. So a broken column means that the family has been severed, or that the pillar on which the family is built is gone. If you look down at the lovely lady that's there. So this one, Jamie and I kind of went back and forth trying to figure out who she was. From what research I've done, this is actually the Virgin Mary. Judging by the fact that she is holding the Easter lilies, that is in artwork that is usually indicative of the Annunciation or Mary in general. The lilies are Easter lilies in particular, and they mean that you are casting off earthly attributes and you are gaining spiritual ones. So kind of like with Mary, you know, that whole thing with conceiving Christ. If you look at the sides of the grave and up around where the urn is, there's actually ivy clinging to it. Ivy is another very common thing in Victorian symbolism, but it basically means that you are clinging to the Lord. Ivy clings and it grows. It is also evergreen, so it never dies. On the wheel, which the wheel, when it's broken like that, again means that the family line has come to an end, or that the journey of life is over and can go on no more. In the center is the lion's head, and the lion is symbolic of course, courage, fortitude, strength, all of the things that we associate with lions. So that is our lovely Roush over here. I think it's probably one of my favorite ones that I found during this whole thing. He just was real dramatic, wasn't he? We have the Radcliffe grave over here, which has the ship on it, and the symbol on the top of it looks like legs running, like a windmill. That's actually the symbol for the Isle of Man up in England. So the ship underneath it is obviously that this was somebody who was a seafarer. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this one is that if somebody was a seafarer, there will always be a ship. You will, unless they were in the Navy, you will never find an anchor symbolizing that this person was a sea captain or somebody who sailed. Anchors, which I've not found a lot of them here, usually are symbols of hope. So for one of the virtues, her symbol is an anchor. So typically she'll be holding it or standing on an anchor. The funny thing with it is that everybody thinks that, of course, if you see an anchor, this is somebody who sailed. Well, if you find anchors on the graves of children, that makes things complicated. So this one here is a perfect example of somebody who led a seafaring life. If you look around the front of the grave, there is the mason symbol. So I do believe he was probably either a shipbuilder or somebody who was a sailor up around the Isle of Man. I don't think we didn't find anything on him, did we?
I didn't even look.
Yeah. So if we find something, we will. So this one, it looks very simple, but it is the perfect representation of the Victorians' absolute obsession with neoclassicism. Like, it was either it's kind of like growing up, you were either an Egyptian kid or you liked the Roman mythology. This is the same thing. They absolutely were obsessed with trying to recreate the awe and majesty of the neoclassic era. So on Mr. Parpart's grave, we have two Greek, I can never say right, Ionic columns, and this would have been just so like in vogue at the time. They would have absolutely loved this. This would have been like what you wanted if you were a classy gentleman of the era. And I thought that it was probably the best example of it that I saw here in the cemetery. And Jamie's got some interesting things to say about him as well too, which kind of rounds everything out with him.
Hey! So as you can see, it was lots of cool information about the different symbols and images that you see on some of the monuments. There was a lot of stuff that I have seen a million times and never had any idea that it
had meaning.
Yeah, especially like a universal meaning. Like it wasn't specific to that person. It's to all the ones that have that type of imaging. There is also a second part coming. This was only part 1. The second part will be in spring of 2023, so we're definitely going to keep a lookout for that.
Yep. And I also thought it was kind of neat that some of the same symbols, just the way that they were positioned, whether their hands are holding books or pointed towards the sky, pointed down, or shaking hands in different ways, that symbols meant different things. And I thought that was very interesting, because how many times you walk to the graveyard and you see a statue with its hands out like this, or one up, one down, and holding a book open or closed. It all means something really different.
Yes.
It was very interesting, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
There were 2 specific things that we individually noticed, which we did not get an answer to, so we will post some comments if we get further information. But one, when it was talking about the woman who was like the lowest of the low on the ship, she had a book that was on top of it, and it had 1715 deeply engraved into like the bottom pages of the book. And nobody seemed to know what the numbers in the book represented, or if the numbers themselves were specific. And the other thing you may have seen on the Rao memorial with the broken column is that it was definitely some type of death shroud, which they had talked about earlier. But in this one, it was like behind it and underneath other items.
Yeah.
So those are a couple things we're definitely going to follow up on, and we'll let you know about. But
Until next time.
stay creepy.